Hey guys, welcome back to another Shep Talk TV review. This week we'll be talking about the new Amazon show, The Boys. But before we get into that review, just a couple more admin notes. If you do like what you see here on my channel, please remember to like, share, and subscribe. This helps my channel greatly, and I truly appreciate it. The second note is I am currently doing a giveaway for the month of August. So if you want all those details on how you can be entered to win, wait until the end of the video and I will have all the explanation you need. Quick synopsis. The Boys are a group of individuals who make sure the superheroes are kept in check, because in this world the superheroes aren't all what they seem to be. Before I do my comparison of the comic book versus the TV show, I wanted to give you pretty much my thoughts on the TV show, and I'm sure I'll intermix it throughout this whole review, and I'll definitely close it out at the end. But when I first heard that The Boys was coming from the comic book format over to TV show or screening format, I was very excited. I'm a big Boys fan. I'm currently doing a reread through of the comics in the omnibus fashion. But my first thought was, man, how are they going to handle all the sex, all the violence, all the language, even the racial and sexual prejudice that they have in the comic books? And to say that Amazon toned it down is pretty much a given. And you guys that have seen the show are probably saying this TV show is toned down, and it is greatly toned down. Out of a 1 to 10, 10 being like, over the top, outrageous kind of stuff, The Boys TV show, I'd give it about a 5. The comic book, I'd probably give it 11. If you haven't read the comic book, first I'd say, obviously, watch the show and then read the comic book. They're I'll get more into it about how different they are, but there are differences, and I don't want to ruin your experience on the on the TV show when you get into the comic book. Okay, let's start off talking about Karl Urban's character, the Butcher, Billy Butcher. I'm not going to go too much in depth on these. I'm just going to give you what my opinions are on these characters and how they translated over to the small screen or the screen. I think Karl Urban did a fantastic job. Sorry, they didn't really change Butcher's character from the comic book to the TV show. They did do changes, and I will talk about that a little later on, about his pretty much the backstory and some of the storyline they did in the TV show. But the Butcher we get on screen is pretty much the Butcher we see in the comic books, just turned down just a little bit. Butcher is a little bit more expressive in his language and his pursuit of certain people in a sexual and abusive way. Jack Quaid plays Huey, or as he's known in the comic books, Wee Huey. The one thing that I really found puzzling in this is that they changed Huey's background from being from Scotland to being from New York. And the reason I find that it's strange is because pretty much all of the other boys in this group, their origins have pretty much stayed the same. Their backgrounds have pretty much stayed the same, except for really one I'll talk about later on. So I found it strange that for some reason I guess they wanted to give us our POV from an American vice a Scottish national. I don't know, it's strange to me on that point. And one thing that's really different in the book compared to the TV show is that in the comic book, Huey is pretty much written for Simon Pegg. And I know in this day and age, Simon Pegg is a little bit too old to play Wee Huey. And so I found it very satisfying that even though Simon Pegg was pretty much too old for Huey, we did get to see him playing Huey's dad. And this has nothing to do against Jack Quaid. I think he did a great job playing Huey. He does bring in that vulnerability that traumatized Huey that we do see in the comic book plus in the TV show. Huey's background really doesn't change much. His girlfriend does get killed by A-Train. And it does set him on a course that, rendezvous with pretty much Butcher and going up against the Seven. But as we see in the TV show and we see more in the comic book, Huey, he's not a fighter. He is not someone that usually stands up for himself. The whole reason that he doesn't really sign the NDA and accept the payment from, America is because he's really traumatized. He's really emotional and he's really inside himself at that point. It's not because he's really trying to stand up to Vault American and saying, hey, screw you, this is, this is wrong. Inside he feels that and he really wants to get that out. But Huey's one of those people that before what happened to him and his girlfriend in A-Train, he believed the superhero hype. He believed that superheroes were out there doing good. And we do get to see that, I think Jack Quaid did a good job of portraying that Huey is not typical boys material. And in the comic books, it stretches. Huey is that guy that you can always rely on him on his insights kind of thing, but he's not usually the guy that thinks with his fists or really wants to get into the fight. He really doesn't want to go into battle. He doesn't want to face off against these superheroes in a physical altercation. They did update Huey a little bit. In the comic books, he wasn't as tech savvy as they're showing him in the movie or in the screen, but I don't think that hurts. It gives him more of a role to be on in the boys. It helps them out. Now I'm probably gonna butcher this guy's name, but Tomer Capion plays the Frenchie, or plays Frenchie, and pretty much they really didn't change up too much on Frenchie. He is a French guy. He is like the jack of all trades for the boys. He pretty much does whatever needs to be done. In the show, they kind of make him, out to be this like gun-toting run, vigilante type person. It's not true how he is in the comic books, but it's not really that different. He does want to go after the soups, and he will, so they haven't really made any changes. Frenchie was pretty much Frenchie, and the actor plays a really good job of Frenchie, and they do the smattering, because in the comic books, Frenchie pretty much talks, I'd say probably 85 to 90% French, and with English mixed in. But obviously on a TV show you don't want to. It's harder to keep track of all that, especially if you have to add subtitles. So I understand they did keep him saying some French phrases and stuff like that throughout the show, but he wasn't predominantly speaking French throughout. Karen Fukuhara, I hope I pronounced that right, plays the female, or as they kind of call her in the show, I think it was Kimiko. And the boys, they pretty much just call her the female. She has probably one of the most changes to her backstory. In the comic books, she really works beforehand, before the boys, she was working as almost an Italian mob enforcer. And in the comics, it shows that sometimes when she needs to sate that need for violence or killing, she sometimes goes back to these mobsters and does jobs that they have for her. And so I see why they changed up her backstory, and she really doesn't come in until like halfway into this series. She, they wanted to give her some, I guess, backstory of why she's so angry and have her more important in the role, in the storyline that they are promoting. I will say though that she's not as violent or as supercharged against the boys, and I'll get later on that, or talk about that later on, because the differences that they made in the show to the comics, you think that in the show it seems like the boys wasn't around before the Butcher came in the scene and talked with Huey. But in the comic books, it's much, much more, and I'll talk about that later. But again, Karen Fukuhara, I think she did a phenomenal job playing that wild-eyed, like kind of Wolverine-esque, fighter, and she just going crazy. I think she did a phenomenal job on that, especially when there's not really too much to go on, when all you're doing is being a raging killing machine. Erin Moriarty plays Annie / Starlight in The Boys. And they didn't change a lot per se in her backstory or her storyline. They did give us at the beginning a little bit more than what we did see in the comic book with Annie and Starlight. She does play that innocent Christian girl that believes that what she's doing in this world is good and what's needed. And so when she does get up to the 7 and finds out that things aren't all what they're cracked up to be, the 7 aren't all what they're cracked up to be. And yes, that blowjob scene you did see in the TV show does happen in the comic book, but the TV show even toned it down, and I will talk about that later as well. But Erin, I think, did a phenomenal job portraying that sweet, innocent girl that all she wants to do is the right thing. She wants to be a true and proper superhero. It's just, that's not how things are being done when you hit the big leagues. Like I said, I'm not going to go through every character. I wanted to hit the major ones that I thought, at least like Huey and Butcher, ones that there were certain changes, but not really big changes, or there were big changes. But, you know, if I was to go through every character on The Boys, we'd be sitting here probably for another hour. But, you know, I think I touched on the main topics. And if there's certain characters you want me to talk about, mention them in the comments, and we can, you know, open up a discussion on certain characters that you might have found really well, or you want to know a little bit more on their backstory in the comic book. So my overall thoughts on The Boys show. I did enjoy The Boys overall. I think they did a phenomenal job with what they were given. Obviously, they got to tone down stuff. I think the actors portrayed the characters that they were given really well. My major qualms are not with the characters or the actors or, you know, any of that, or even the sets. It's with the writers and some of the decisions they made and about how they wanted the storyline to go, or what storyline they were using. So overall, I did enjoy The Boys. So I want to put it out there, when I start doing the comparisons and the differences of the comic book to the TV show, I'm not hating on the TV show. I really enjoyed the TV show. There are just certain things in the comic books that I thought they did really well that I would have loved to see on the small screen. I understand some of the other stuff they couldn't bring to the small screen, and I'm sure the studios were probably like, no, you're not bringing that storyline to the screen. My first major issue, I think, with The Boys TV show is I think the creators thought there's probably no way we're going to get a second season for this TV show. So let's see what all we can throw at it. And they did throw a lot of stuff in there, and the pacing was really fast, and I think they sped through a lot of storylines that in the comic books took issues and issues to go through. And I think if they would have planned ahead and thought, okay, if we do get a second season, let's do it this way. I think they didn't. They don't think that they're getting a second season, but I hope they do. It's just sad that they sped through certain things by taking their time and developing them better. Now let's get into speaking about the differences between the comic book and the TV show. And the first one that really stood out to me is, in the comic book, the Seven and the Boys know each other. There has been past history. Before episode 1, there was a truce between the Boys and the Seven. Pretty much what they kept the same was Lamplighter did go after Mallory and killed his granddaughter, and then in return the Boys killed Lamplighter. In the comic books, we do see Lamplighter when you're dead. In the comic books, you know, the things they explain where you do kind of get reanimated, but I can see why they didn't show that or even talk about that storyline. But there was history. The Seven and the Boys know each other. Everybody in the Seven except for Starlight, because she wasn't part of the Seven at that time, know about the Boys, and the Boys know about the Seven. Vault American is pretty much true to form in the TV show and the comic books. It's just in the comic books, Vault American has been screwing over Americans since like the Vietnam conflict. I don't think they were earlier. Or no, they were doing, sorry. In World War II, they did screw over. They were doing just like some of the corporations now, where we see they cut corners to make a profit off of, you know, being government contracts. So, you know, from World War II all the way up until present day, Vault America has pretty much been that government contracting company that just has a stranglehold on everything. One of the major differences, though, was Elizabeth Shue playing Stillwell. In the comic books, it's a guy. It didn't really make any difference. I do think, though, that in the comic books, Stillwell was a lot more a lot more devious than what we see with Elizabeth Shue's portrayal of Stillwell. Her relationship between Homelander is just really weird. In my eyes, she didn't seem to be that person that was, you know, had her hands in everything like Vault American really does. So that was one of the major differences. Vault American is one of those, not, you know, companies that doesn't really care about the American population. They're out there to make that God almighty dollar. Compound V. it's not as big of a secret as it is in the TV show as it was in the comic books. Pretty much everybody knows about Compound V. One of the big differences, and I'm very surprised about it, is that actually the boys are dosed with Compound V. When Huey joins the boys, Butcher actually gets Compound V from the CIA and injects Huey with it. It gives them that super strength, super endurance, so that way they can go toe-to-toe with these superheroes that are, because in reality, not even talking about Homelander, because Homelander's on the top of the top, but even the lowest rung superhero could pretty much wipe out the boys with no issue. So I was very surprised that it didn't look like any of the boys except for the female was dosed with Compound V. The boys in the CIA, before the truce happened, or before everybody, the boys disbanded, the boys were working with the CIA. As I said, Mallory did bring them on, all the boys on board, and they were pretty much a black ops, operation that was run by the CIA. In the comic books, when Butcher gets the boys back together again, he first goes to the CIA director and shows them that the new evidence that the soups are up to no good anymore, and they're actually planning something. And they are fully funded, and they do work out of the Flatiron Building in New York City. And that's how Butcher gets Compound V to give to Huey, so that way he can become super as well and go toe-to-toe against the superheroes. They do make a mention, I can't remember what episode it is, where the director, what's her name? Susan Rayner, who was played by Jennifer Esposito, I do believe. She does make a comment. It's like, oh, do you want to be fully funded? Do you want to work out of the Flatiron Building? Da 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 da. And that's all pulled directly from the comic book, because the CIA does not betray the boys like they do in the TV show. The CIA really doesn't have any involvement with the boys, except for they're the ones that are funding them and keeping them operational, but no one really knows about it. The Seven don't go after them. Vought American doesn't go after the CIA. It's pretty much the boys against Vought American and the Seven. The boys themselves, Butcher, Frenchie, the female, like I've mentioned before, all worked together prior to episode 1 or even volume 1 in the comic book. They had that relationship. They were going after the Seven. They were the people that kept the superheroes in check and made sure that if you stepped out of line, it was no longer going to be swept under the table. The boys were going to knock you down. So I wish they would have kind of kept that together in the TV show, because I would have loved to have seen the unit working together as a unit. Vice, and Frenchie and Butcher had worked previously, but the female hadn't been there. Frenchie and the female's relationship is pretty much the same as it was in the comic books. Frenchie's the person that helps calm her down when she's getting these needs to kill. Though I got more of a vibe that on the TV show that there was a romantic thing with Frenchie and the female. And again, I'm not 100% recalling everything. I don't believe Frenchie and the female in the comic books have a romantic relationship. I could be wrong. It's been a while since I've read the comic books, and I'm only in volume 2 of the omnibus of the boys. And the last thing, pretty much talking about the boys. The boys wear black trench coats. It's like their ID. It's like their uniform. It's their identifier. And I kind of miss that. Butcher wears a trench coat throughout the whole show. I wish all of them would wear it. And I hope in season 2 we do get to see the boys coming together as that identity. I think even in the promo material, the boys were wearing the black trench coats. So I don't understand why that wasn't in the TV show. To me, I know it's not a big thing, but it's one of those little details that would have been nice. One of the main members of the boys is missing in this as well. It's Terror, Butcher's bulldog. I don't know why they didn't keep him or bring him in. He does have 2 mentions. When Huey gets in the Butcher's car and Huey looks in the back seat and sees that there's dog toys, and Huey asks Butcher, does he have a dog? And Butcher says no. And then also we see it in the flashback to the Butcher when he's with his wife. We see a bulldog, which I obviously assume to be Terror, sitting in his bed. It's not a major thing, but Butcher was that companion that I mean, Tara was that companion to Butcher that he could talk to and really be his self with Tara. He also trained Tara to pretty much fornicate with anything when given a command. I think there's a poodle in the comic books. I think maybe a pigeon, a cat. There, also some other characters that were in the comic book. But it was just one of those things where it would have been nice to just have Terror, sorry, by his side walking, even if it was just for one shot, and then you could have said something that, he was being kept somewhere else. But I miss Terror. I wish we could have seen Terror in this TV show a little bit more. Huey and Annie's storyline. This is another thing where I talked about earlier where the creators seem to sped up the storyline. In the comic books, Huey and Annie do meet in Central Park on a bench. And they do continue meeting that for a while before they take things to the next level. They don't find out about each other, though, for issues upon issues. And it really comes about when the boys are going through all the old surveillance videos that they have on the 7, because they kept no one ever thought to take out the videos or even, take out the surveillance cameras in the 7's headquarters while the truce was going on. And so when they come back, they start going to watch through all the surveillance videos just to figure out why or what they've been up to. And so that's how the boys find out that Annie is Starlight. She doesn't really give up her secret identity like they do in the TV show. She is not known publicly and, privately that way. I think this would have been something better if they slowed it down. It'd been more deliverable. Not deliverable, but God, had more substantial, be more, God, what's the word I'm looking for? Have a better payoff. If, over, like, say, season 1, you seem to get close to Huey and Annie figuring each other's story out, or having, Butcher or MM sit down Huey and be like, Huey, your girlfriend happens to be a super, and she's a member of the 7. I think having it be revealed in season 2 or season 3 even would have been a whole lot better than having it rushed to me in season 1. I think we don't get the payoff that we did in the comic books on that one. Again, I think it's just because the creators probably didn't think that the boys would be such a big hit and that we would, not get a second or even third season. Another one of the biggest changes from the comic books to the TV show was Homelander. They toned him way down, and I think they toned him down way too much. And I don't know if it was because they're trying to get us to feel for Homelander more than what we would in the comic books. Homelander is I'm going to try not to curse because I don't want this to be like, an over 18 thing, even though the boys are. But he is a major creep, a-hole, all kinds of things. And this whole relationship with him and Stillwell is very, very weird. Homelander in the comics knows he is the top superhero out there, knows that really no one can touch him. He's pretty much doing what American wants him to do because they pretty much pay him and cover up all the crap that he does. He does not care about the little person below him. He would rather, if he's trying to get to something, he will kill you. He will, if he desires your girlfriend or desires your wife, he will take them without any hesitation. He is not a good person. And I think I'm talking about this a little bit more in this book, in this review. I don't like it that they're trying to humanize these superheroes. In the comic books, these guys are bad, evil people. They've gotten, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And we see it in the comic books. And in the TV show, I think they try to humanize them too much. And that's what we're getting with Homelander. Yes, we do see that he's an a-hole. We do see he's creepy and weird. We do see he's out for himself, but it's way more toned down than we see in the comic book. And I'll give you an example. I don't know if I talk about it more. But when Annie, in the TV show, when Annie goes to become one of the 7 and she's, given the tour around with the Deep, and the Deep finally drops trowel and he says, well, if you want to be a member of the 7, here's your ticket. In the comic book, not only is it the Deep, It's also Black Noir and Homelander. Homelander is pretty much the one that's in charge of doing all this. So he makes her, go down on all three of them to get on the Seven, or they'll kick her off. And I know they toned it down in the thing they did with the storyline with the Deep. Again, I don't want my evil superheroes to be too humanized, because I don't want to feel like, oh, they're misunderstood or they're not all bad. And I get it. Starlight in the comic books is not a bad person. There are some good superheroes in the comic books, but the majority, and I'm going to say like 90 to 95% of the superheroes in the comic books are terrible people. They know they can get away with doing whatever they want, and they really don't care. Vought American will cover it up for them because, one, Vought American is making billions of dollars off these people, and the people love it. The people eat it up, and the people don't pay attention to the stuff that happens pretty much off screen, off comic book. Another difference is, and then again, I bring this back to where I think they didn't think they'd get a second season, and so they wanted to try to throw everything is that in the comic book, because of the truce between the Seven and the boys, the boys don't go after the Seven right away. The Seven don't go after the boys right away. In the comic book, there are tons of other superhero teams out there that the boys go after first. There's Teenage Kicks, which we got a little bit of that scene with the Mesmer and talked about with the A-Train, but that's usually the first team that the boys went after. They also go after the G-Men, which is pretty much your X-Men spoof on it. But the boys do send messages back and forth to the Seven, letting them know, hey, we're back in town, we're watching you because we know you're up to something. But they don't really go over the line. They don't really break that truce right away. Because again, when that truce gets broken and it turns into an all-out war, it's not an all-out war both sides want. They don't want to kill each other. Well, most of the team don't want to kill each other. Homelander knows that he doesn't want an all-out war because he doesn't want to lose people. He doesn't even want to die himself. And, it's all about Homelander wanting to do what he wants to do. So I think, again, it's all because they didn't know how many seasons they were going to get. So they kind of made the focus on the boys, or the Seven and the boys. I think you could have still done that in season 1 and had them work their way up to the Seven. But again, I understand where they're coming from on the TV show. And I guess one of the major changes we're going to see in the TV show that was not in the comic books is Butcher's wife being alive at the end of season 1. She is not alive in the comic books. Butcher finds her body pretty much ravaged and destroyed because of the superhero baby that she has, because she was raped by one of the big boys. And Butcher believes it is Homelander. So that whole storyline is crazy. I don't know where they're going to go with it, because in the comic books, Butcher's whole motivation for going after Homelander is because he believes that Homelander raped and was pretty much the cause of his wife's death. Again, it's different, and I think there's tons of stuff you can do with how this will mess up Butcher pretty much. So I like to see where it goes. Yeah, it's a very major change from the comic book to the TV show, but I think it's one that's definitely can pay off if done right in season 2. What I'm looking forward to if season 2 happens. Again, like I just mentioned, that whole dynamic between Butcher's wife, Homelander, and Butcher himself, that's interesting. I would definitely want to see where they take that. The whole Annie and Huey storyline, like I said, they sped it up. So a lot of stuff that happened within like volume 1 and volume 2, we got to see in season 1. So I would definitely like to see, because in the comic book, Huey and Annie really use each other to wrap their heads around stuff that is happening at work. And they really are a good support system to each other. So I'd like to see how that continues down the road. Ooh, excuse me. And I'd probably say third would be the Vought American Corporation. Especially now that Stillwell is out of the picture now. Who's going to step up and fill Stillwell's shoes? And are we going to see just how evil and manipulative this corporation is? I mean, in the comic books, they have their hands in everything. They have The VP, the Vice President of the United States, is pretty much in their pocket. They're in every corporation, every market possible out there. They are not a good company, and I would love to see more of the kind of behind the scenes working of that, especially now with Homelander being kind of out there, the Seven being in the position they are in right now. It's going to be very interesting to see where they take that. And now, especially with the whole superheroes being part of the Department of Defense, it's going to be very interesting to see where everything goes in season 2. So guys, with that, I will give The Boys 4 out of 5 Sheps. It's not perfect. They did make some drastic changes. Some of them I liked, some of them I didn't like. But overall, I did enjoy the show. I would recommend the show to people. I don't know if I'd recommend it first over the comic book or vice versa. I guess it depends on what type of person I'm talking to, whether or not they are a reader of comic books or if they prefer the visual genre. But overall, I did really like it, The Boys. I hope that my comparison didn't seem like I was favoring the comic book more over the TV show. The TV show is different in its own right. We couldn't get the pure translation. We shouldn't get a pure translation from the comic book to the small screen. So again, guys, 4 out of 5 Sheps. If you haven't seen The Boys, what are you doing watching this video? Because I spoiled a lot of shit. Oh. And maybe I should put a spoiler warning at the beginning of this video. So that way if someone stumbles across my channel, they won't get ruined for The Boys TV show. Thank you guys for staying to the end of this video. Like I said at the top of this video, I am doing a giveaway for the month of August. So it's for an 8x10 photo of Michael Shanks, better known for playing Dr. Daniel Jackson on SG-1. To be entered to win this 8x10 photo, I need you to do 3 things. The first one is to be a subscriber to my channel. And I need you to make sure that your subscription is set, if it's set to private, it needs to be set to public. I will put down in the description down below the instructions on how to change your settings from private to public. The second thing is I need you to share this video. It helps me expand my fan base and get the word out about my channel, and I truly appreciate it. The third thing, tell me down below, what was your favorite moment on The Boys TV show? Are you a big comic book fan? And what was your moment that you liked in your comic book? Either one. Just tell me what your favorite moment was with either the TV show or the comic book. And as always, guys, thank you for watching, and I'll see you at the next review.